All right, we're good to begin.
Good afternoon, superintendents. This is the and guest. We always have our guests with us today, various K group representatives and our co-op directors. I think Commissioner Tackett is on, as well as John Akers, Center for School Safety. And we've also continued to ask the representative of the Kentucky Non-Public School Commission to be on this call, as well as the, I think, 3 to 4 superintendents of the various diocese schools, so in order that we can share similar information. And that's due to because they are following the lead of public schools in their areas related to school closure and reopening efforts. So I want to welcome everyone to the Special Superintendent's Webcast. It's May 12th. 2020. We have another full agenda for you today. And as a reminder, don't forget to go to the gosoapbox.com website to ask questions. And the access code is KDE COVID. And I think that will also be on your screen periodically to remind you of that. And then we will obviously take questions that are specific to the subject matter being discussed. We'll try to take those in real time. And then those folks will stay on the webcast till the end, and we'll take all questions, make sure all questions are answered. And we have allotted 2 hours for this webcast. Hope we can finish a little early and get you out and give you a little bit of time back to your day. Again, as I said, we have a full agenda today. We're going to get a communications update. We have some really exciting news about some recognition opportunities that we're engaged in both nationally and statewide and locally there in your communities that you all are doing. But we're going to be able to have a statewide recognition of seniors in the class of 2020, as well as participation in a national recognition. Interim Communications Director Tony Cons will be talking to you about that and also give you an update on, which I'm really excited about, this update on the 2020 Commissioner search. And then we have continued guidance for the reopening of schools in the fall of 2020 from Dr. Foster and Kay Kennedy. And then finally, additional updates. You've heard us for several weeks talk about the Federal CARES Act funds, and we're getting really close to having those funds in your hands and for use to benefit schools and districts and students. Robin Kinney will be giving us that update. Tony, I will turn it over to you. Turn on, I think you're muted.
Yes, that would help. So sorry about that. Good afternoon, Commissioner and KDE leadership team and fellow superintendents. As the Commissioner said, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you all. You all should have the PowerPoint that was shared with you all. It's should be in an email and also attached to your schedule. Please let me know if you can see it.
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the communications update and let you know, first of all, how much I appreciate the photos that you all have shared with us. We've received to date between 1,500 and 2,000 photos from over 220 different schools across the state of Kentucky. We are right now working on getting those all together in a variety of methods. I think several of you have probably seen our social media shout outs that we've been doing. We're scheduling several of those throughout the day that we are putting on Twitter and on Facebook. And so those are just a couple of things that we're doing. One thing that we're very excited about that's going to be airing this weekend across all the national networks. This is something that we are doing in partnership with the CCSSO. It's called Graduate Together, America Honors the Class of 2020. It's a 1-hour primetime special, and it'll be streaming on multiple online platforms as well. And as part of that, we were asked to shoot a video of Interim Commissioner Brown doing with his message to the class of 2020. And we've shared in that video, I think that you all were shared as part of his Monday message yesterday, the video with several of the pictures that you all submitted to us. And so Commissioner Brown, if you would like me to share that, I would like to share that with today, if you don't mind.
Yes, go ahead while you're getting that up. I will explain, this is a project, a joint project with the Council of Chief State School Officers working with other national partners. And the request and requirement was every state's Commissioner of Education or Chief State School Officer needed to do the narration. My preference would be to have the state board chair do the narration or another person in state government, since I'm an interim, but that was, we had to meet the requirements. So you will see and hear me at the beginning and the end, and hear me during doing the narration message while the pictures are playing.
All right, hold on. Let me know, again, you're gonna have to let me know about this audio thing, because sometimes I'm still working on this. Hold on. Sorry. Let me share my screen. I gotta make sure I follow my steps correctly here. I apologize. All right, there we go. Now I have to do the video. Do you see the?
Well, you see the video.
Okay, I'm going to share the audio, include the system audio, and then let me know if you hear the audio. Do you hear the audio?
No, I think you have to click the audio before you share the video.
Okay, sorry. Give me a minute. I'm working on it. All right, let me try this again.
Those of you watching at home, you can take notes as to how to share a video with audio using Microsoft Teams.
All right, I'm trying this. It says give control. All right, share. It is just not letting me have that option. Let me see here. All right, we may have to present this here in a minute. Let me know if you hear it now.
This is Kentucky Interim Education,
Yes.
Kevin Brown. Congratulations to all of Kentucky's graduating seniors, our resilient and strong class of 2020. The past several months have tested you in ways that no other senior class has been tested. You had to make many sacrifices, prom, competitions, and so many other senior events you had looked forward to ever since you began high school 4 years ago. You had to adapt to a new way of learning in just a few short weeks. You have had to stay home to protect others in your community. I know that one of the biggest sacrifices has been not being able to close out this final year of your K-12 education with friends and family during a traditional graduation ceremony. I want to tell you how proud I am of each and every one of you. You made it, and you have so much to be proud of. Think about all you have accomplished these past 4 years. Aside from all the academic requirements and exams you have passed, you have also grown into a young adult. All the sporting events, competitions, clubs, and classes have helped prepare you for where you are today. You dealt with the hardships, the disappointment, and the stress. You did it. This will truly go down as a year, and the class of 2020 will always be a class that will be remembered. And while the coronavirus might have taken some memories from you, I hope it will give you the confidence to know you can and you will get through the inevitable hurdles in life. You still have your whole life ahead of you and an exciting future, a history that you get to choose how to write. No virus can take that from you. I speak for all of Kentucky when I say I'm proud of you. Congratulations.
All right, so that was Kevin's video, and if you want to talk a little bit about that while I go back to my PowerPoint, that would be great.
Yeah, this is, as Tony mentioned, this will be, and if you, Jennifer, you can make a note, we need, and Teresa, we need to send just a calendar invite to all the superintendents to remind them of this national show. I believe it's Saturday evening. So they have that on their calendars. And then Tony will be providing a press release as that you all can use through your communication efforts as well to notify your communities. And it's going to be a national presentation, and then states, students and parents and families from the various 50 states will then be directed to websites to see these specific videos, because they're not going to have time to show all 50 videos. And I think that's the general run of the show. Is that an accurate description, Tony?
Right. Yeah. So they will have, each state will have representation of some sort that will, there are several celebrities that are involved. I believe former President Obama is going to be giving an address to the graduates as well. And then every state has had the opportunity to record a video and also submit stories. So you'll be able to visit the Kentucky page, which we've comprised several stories and pictures together as well. And that will all be available here probably by the end of the week, and we'll share all that information out to you via press release. We're very excited about this opportunity to share with you all.
I would just say, we obviously only had so many minutes and seconds and could only get a fraction of the pictures. The Kentucky tribute that Tony will talk about next will have many more pictures, if not the majority of pictures that have been submitted. And not to say our video that's going to the national is better than the other states, but we chose to use as many pictures as we could instead of just me sitting there talking. Some states are just having their commissioner talk without pictures, and that's fine as well. But we really wanted to showcase our students, and so I think we accomplished that. So Tony, if you want to talk about the Kentucky version of this, that'll be much more personal.
Yes, our next tribute, and I'm hoping, I did speak with the governor's office today, so I'm very excited as we continue to work out these details. This is going to be in conjunction with the Lieutenant Governor's office, the governor's office, and several other special guests that we are working to confirm the details with. We're looking at a 45-minute special that's going to include some musical guests and some other special treats for our seniors. So as Kevin has mentioned, this has taken a lot of time and a lot of effort on your part to send us these pictures. And I just want you all to know that that has not gone unnoticed, and we've received and we've looked at every single thing that you've sent us. And we are trying to make sure that we put that together in a way that is memorable, not just for your school districts, but also for your students and their families. And as soon as we get those details firmed up, we will be sharing those with you, hopefully by the end of this week. Right now, we're looking at an air date of probably the end of next week. And if we're not going to be able to stream it, we're going to talk with local television stations across the state, and also work with possibly streaming it through social media channels of ours and the governor's and lieutenant governor's channels as well. So again, more details will be available for that. Also would be interested, if you all would be interested, if we provided the video that you all can share with your families as well, and maybe host a watch party of some sort on your social media. So if you're interested or have any ideas on that, please let me know, because again, the goal of this is to share this this tribute to the class of 2020 with your families and your graduates as we come up to the end of their senior year. The next thing I was on my agenda to talk about is the search for the next education commissioner. And just as you know, a week ago, the Board of Education, we went ahead and sent out, in case you didn't know, our notice in your email. We have formally invited applications and nominations for the commissioner. And on your PowerPoint, there are links to both of the things. You can see the 8 or 9 page brochure. If you click on those links, they are also available on the Commissioner Search website, which is part of the KDE website. The important thing that I would like to note, that anybody can nominate somebody, or if you know of a candidate that you think would be an outstanding commissioner for the state of Kentucky, please go ahead and let Greenwood and Asher, that is our search firm, please let them know who that person would be. And they're doing some initial screening of applications right now, and they will continue to do so until the appointment is made. But for best consideration, they're asking for everyone to submit their materials by May 31st of this month. And anybody wishing to nominate a candidate should submit that letter of nomination, including contact information for the nominee as soon as possible. So again, if you know somebody who would meet the qualities, and again, you can look at the 10-page brochure as well as the invitation for applications and nominations. And my department will again be sending out another press release again this week, formally inviting people to nominate somebody that they might know, and let Greenwood and Asher know who that person might be. That will be coming out probably Thursday or Friday of this week. And Commissioner, that's all I have as part of my report. And my next, I believe it's Kelly Foster and Kay Kennedy.
And before I just wanted to clarify, Greenwood Asher, they are the search firm. They don't make any of the decisions, and they are doing a lot of the legwork of the search process on behalf of KDE staff and the State Board of Education. So just want to make sure everyone understands that they gather names and do research and assist us, assist the board. The board makes the decision, of course, in gathering a pool of candidates. Before we'll move now into the guidance for reopening of schools. Dr. Kelly Foster with the Office of Continuous Improvement and Support, and then also Kay Kennedy, the Office of Finance and Operations. This is while they are presenting us today. This is obviously involves every office at the department, as it involves every aspect of your school district personnel as well. And I also know that we know that you're having frustration over this, because right now in a normal year you are planning or have already fully planned for the upcoming school year, and we have a lot of unknowns that are still out there. I was able to monitor these U.S. Senate committee testimony today. I don't know if any of you had time at it. In Washington, D.C., they had Dr. Fauci, the CDC head, and us on there. And if there's any consensus at all, is that there's no consensus as to what the fall might look like or what the summer might look like as far as the number of COVID-19 cases, whether there will be a spike, whether we will continue to see a plateau or a lessening off. And then, of course, you get into, that was mentioned just a few minutes ago when I was watching it, some states like New York and Louisiana are seeing declines and a leveling off, but then now we're seeing some spikes and some hot spots in other states and some more rural areas. So what that means for us in planning for the school year is that, and as I said last week, we know we have to be prepared and we know we have to plan. We just don't know exactly the scenario we're planning for. And that makes it very frustrating for you as a superintendent and for your staff and for your communities. But the plan is, as you all know, until further notice, we're going to be having these webcasts every Tuesday until further notice. There may be times where we need to have a second webcast. And this is going to be a rolling format. You'll hear from Dr. Foster and Kay Kennedy today about what we know to date. Some initial plans and frameworks that we're talking about that you need to be thinking about at the district level about how to reopen next year. And then as we continue to get more information from public health, as the data continues to come in, as projections, it's much like I perceive over the summer will be much like a weather forecast, in that as we get close to the beginning of school, we'll know more about what the virus is doing, and then that will help trigger plans that you may have on paper but need to operationalize when school starts in session. We're already hearing some great creative ideas from school districts that you are really, and we're going to share some of those, if not today, will be in the guidance document. For example, we heard from a school superintendent this week, and I think several have some similar ideas about what do you do with the students who do not want to be back in an environment with a large group of students, or live with family members that have compromising health conditions and they don't want the potential for exposure. How do you educate those kids? And so we're beginning to see some really creative ideas out there. And at the state level, I can tell you we're going to be very flexible. we're still in a time of crisis and an emergency, and we want to work with you. And when you have these types of ideas, to do what we need to do at the state level by either waiving regulations or talking to the governor's office and the lieutenant governor and the cabinet about waiver of and any statutory relief you may need. So keep those ideas coming. I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Foster and Kay Kennedy.
Great, thank you. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
So last week during the superintendent's webcast, Kevin mentioned to you all that he had a call with the governor and lieutenant governor, and they wanted us to start thinking about reopening of school and thinking in the format of an early opening, a traditional opening, and a late opening. And so what I'm going to talk to you about today is a little bit about the guidance that we're putting together at the department around early, traditional, and late reopenings. And we hope to have that guidance to you at the end of this week or early next week. And as Kevin mentioned, we see this kind of as a document that will continue on. You know, the information that we have right now with our partnership with public health could change throughout the summer. So keep in mind, we will be updating this throughout the next several months to help you guys make the best decisions you possibly can. One of the things that I will share with you, as Kevin previously mentioned, is this is a cross-agency group working on this guidance. And as of this morning, we had about 150 pages worth of guidance from each office at KDE. So what we are doing right now during this webcast is going through that guidance, looking at things that can be removed because it's repeated information, to try to make that be something that is easy for you all to review and share with your local boards, your district leadership teams, your school leadership teams. So something to keep in mind is that the guidance will be divided into 4 different buckets. And those buckets will be district and school operations, teaching and learning, health and safety, and exceptional children. So you will have information around those 4 buckets when you're thinking about opening early at a traditional time or a late time. Next slide, please. So thinking about early reopening, if you typically open school around August the 10th and you were to open maybe around July the 20th, we want to think about early reopening if everything is kind of regular. Schools would reopen in the fall, most students would be back in the classroom, or most of your faculty would be fully staffed. The second category is adjusted. So adjusted reopening for an early timeline would be the schools would open, but there are staff shortages. You're having to implement social distancing measures that would impact capacity, or some, but not all of the schools can reopen. So many of you I have talked to this week, and you've talked about possibly having some of your teachers doing face-to-face instruction, some teachers doing virtual instruction. And so that would be an example of the adjusted model. So as we go through these, all early, traditional, and late, when the guidance comes to you, you will have early reopening guidance for a regular scenario and for an adjusted scenario. Next slide, please. The traditional reopening, if you typically open school mid to late August, that's what we're considering a traditional reopening. And once again, does that look like what you're normally used to in a regular scenario, with most of your students there, most of your teachers there, fully staffed? Or you could have the adjusted model where you may have certain grade levels coming certain days of the week. Part of your school will be done virtually, part of it will be face-to-face. Next slide, please. And then the late reopening would probably be sometime postponing school until October or later. And once again, looking at, does it look more like what we're used to if we're not starting until October, or are we still having to do part virtual, part face-to-face, keeping social distancing in mind? And when you're thinking about the adjusted model, don't just think about classroom instruction. Think about what it looks like with students on school buses, what it would look like serving breakfast and lunch. Would students actually come together in a cafeteria, or would meals have to be served in the classroom? Many of you that I've spoken with over the last few days are already working on plans with your district teams. And one of the things that we really want to highly encourage is to make sure that you have a local public health representative there in your planning meetings. And also, you should have some type of district health coordinator on your staff. So both of those people need to be involved in all the decision making that's happening as you start to develop these plans. Someone from your public local health office, as well as your district health coordinator. I can let you know that we are working very closely with public health. Robin Kinney, myself, and Kay were on a call this morning with them. They are working on some guidance. We are working on some guidance, and we are going to share that with each other. And that way we can give you the most accurate information over the next several weeks and months. And at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Kay, and she's going to talk to you a little bit more about the resources we're using as we develop this guidance document.
Okay, next slide, please.
Okay, before you start, I'll clarify, and thank you, Kelly, for that. I just wanted to make sure everyone knows that the early, the traditional, and the late, these are terms to get you thinking about these potential options. You don't have to use these terms. You can brand this. You can call, if you want to have several plans at the district level, that you call Plan A, Plan B, Plan C, or the Golden Lion plan, or whatever you want to tie it to. We're not wedded to these terms. These terms and the guidance we're giving you, it's talking about getting you to think about a scenario. And you may ask yourself, well, why do I need to even think about opening July 20th? Well, and as we said talked a little bit about this last week, the governor wanted to make sure districts were aware there could be a scenario, and that this is a could be situation. We don't know this yet because we don't have this data. It will not happen until over the summer of what the virus is doing. But we could have a scenario where Kentucky's cases continue to plateau or drop off or start to fall. And that might be a really good time to start school, because there could be a prediction of a spike in the fall. If you were to choose to start early, that means you would have a window of time to get in-person classes in under your belt, even if it were under the adjusted scenario of social distancing in place. And then if there were to be a spike, you would be off of school or out of school, or maybe you transitioned to NTI, or maybe you had a number of days in that you could have some fall break built in there. Of course, we could have another scenario that happens over the summer where we have a rise in cases in July, and it would not be advisable for any school to come back in on July 20th. And maybe you need to you would maybe go to your traditional plan or your late plan. And we said all this last week, but I just wanted to reiterate why we want to make sure you're thinking of your school calendar in these terms. And then I think, Kay, I want to remind you to also give details about, we're also not requiring you to submit to us 3 or more calendars. And if you want to talk about that, you can as well, or I can follow up after you go.
Thank you, Kevin. What I wanted to share with everybody is the fact that there are just a myriad of resources available online through various supporting organizations like CCSSO, the National Association of School Boards, consultants to each of those, as well as some states have already issued guidance. So trying to gather all of that and take the best of what everybody has to offer and get your arms around that is quite a challenge. But we're trying to present you with as complete a scenario of information as we possibly can. And what I'd like to share with you on this particular slide is the fact that all of the plans that the governor has been talking about in reopening various phases of the economy have a set of guidelines, and we were at healthy at home for a while, and now we're talking about healthy at work. And this is what we know today, how to be healthy at work. And whether or not you talk about work being school or some other kind of entity, we're trying to make sure that we think about these healthy at work guidelines, enforcing social distancing, making sure we have the necessary PPE, hand washing, hand sanitizers, restricting common areas. Think about the common areas in your school building and how you're going to control those. Proper sanitation, conducting temperature and health checks. Create a testing plan in the event that someone does test positive and you have either colleagues or other students that need to be tested. What's that going to look like? How can you accommodate folks who may be fragile, whether they be students or staff? Kelly mentioned the Healthy at Work officer, and a lot of the guidance coming out for school districts is not only a Healthy at Work officer, but a committee of people to help inform the decisions that need to take place at all phases of the organization, from operations around feeding students and transporting students to the actual delivery of instruction. An overarching concern for any back to work or back to school guideline is to make sure that employees are educated and trained in how to deal with these various aspects. How do they enforce social distancing? How do they make sure that hand washing and hand sanitizing is occurring at the appropriate places? And then finally, how do we manage contact tracing in light of the folks that we deal with in terms of students and the HIPAA and FERPA and all those other considerations that need to be taken under advisement if a person does turn up to be positive at school. What we try to do from the department's perspective is incorporate these Healthy at Work guidelines in all of the areas that we want to think about. And this does speak to the duplication of some of the questions that and some of the information we got back from various offices at KDE, because everybody recognizes that it's important that we be socially distant, that we have proper sanitation, and we do all of these things to keep the environment as safe as possible. With respect to other operations at the sort of district level, I guess if you want to talk about that, is what kind of calendar should you consider, or do you consider, as you approach this next year? And some of you have already even submitted your original calendars, and you're thinking now, is that really the way that we want to go? Does that give us enough flexibility? And as Kevin mentioned, we are going to be very flexible, but we would like for you to take under advisement that we move the date back for calendar submission earlier this year. You have to the end of July to get that in. So as soon as you can arrive at what you think is a reasonable calendar, please do get that in. And we always have the amended calendars to catch up at the end of the year with what actually happened. So I'm sure that you will find other resources that you can utilize in your district and that can apply to situations that you may want to cover specific to your students. What we are providing you is a framework, hopefully a way for you to capture your ideas and your plans, and that will also allow you to identify the gaps and maybe the risks involved in some of the things that you're thinking about. So this will become more apparent, I think, as the guidance document comes out. And as Kelly mentioned, it is a living, breathing document, and we expect to issue additional versions as we learn more. Okay. Any questions for the reopening part of the program?
Tony, do we have any soapbox questions yet regarding this issue?
I'm going to unshare the screen there. Give me a moment. Yes, I'm going to go ahead. Give me 1 minute. Apparently have several of these open on the screen here.
While you're getting those ready, I just wanted to reiterate, we want you to know that we know this is frustrating. We know this is the time of year where you are starting to put the finishing touches, if you haven't already, on your plans for next year. And you can breathe maybe a little sigh of relief with the closing of a school year and knowing your plans are made for the next, and we know you don't have that satisfaction this year. Know that we also are running the School for the Deaf and School for the Blind, and we're sharing a lot of that uncertainty with you because we don't know how we're going to open those schools and the timeline yet either. And so we are going through that same exercise. That frustration and exists around the country with every other state and with other superintendents as well, just because of the unknown nature of what we're dealing with. In the call today that our staff had with public health, it was probably safe to say that our public health counterparts are also frustrated because they can't look into a crystal ball and predict exactly how the virus will behaving and how it will behave and transform over the summer. So just know we understand that. And the best advice for you is to plan, and think of alternative scenarios. And we're going to be here to give you as much guidance and as we can, and to try to flesh that out as we move through the summer.
Okay. Our first question is, as we consider adopting different calendars for the next school year, how is the role of the calendar committee impacted? Are they involved in the recommendation, or is it just a Board of Education decision?
This is Kay. I would, if at all possible, try to present to your calendar committee the scenarios that you are taking under advisement, but I still think it's important to get the input of your calendar committee with respect to those decisions that they give you input on, probably around potential breaks and other times that school may be canceled or items rescheduled based on the weather and that sort of stuff. So I think it's important to get their input prior to the determination of what your original calendar is going to look like.
Okay.
And of course, just as it happened this school year, you obviously did not pull your calendar committees together and around the week of May 16th and 13th because it was a crisis and you had to make decisions in real time. You were lucky if you could pull your board together. So, I would hope that we'd have a little bit more notice, but we're dealing with a virus and a public health issue. And so you could very well be down the road to opening early in a scenario in your school district. And we get some updates on the virus and recommendations from public health that could change that plan overnight. And you would have to react and go to another plan that you have hopefully thought about over the summer.
Okay, there was a message here about please send out reopening information via email to superintendents because the information gets hard to find on the KDE web pages. And so I can go ahead and address that shortly and pretty shortly. So we do send everything out to the superintendents. That communication does come directly from the commissioner's address. In addition, I know that my office also sends all of the guidance information out via reopening information to the superintendents. So for some reason, if you're not receiving any of the guidance documents, please be sure to send me an email and let me know that you're not receiving those, and we'll make sure that you are on the superintendent distribution list. The other information also, make sure that you are actually going to the KDE COVID-19 page, because a lot of this information is not easy to find right on our home site. And that is why we created the KDE COVID-19 website. That is where we're putting all of the guidance, whether it's the reopening, guidance on graduations, guidance on how to close out this year, guidance on gear, which we're going to talk about here in just a minute. You're going to receive every single document that we are providing guidance on. We are putting on the COVID-19 website, as well as sending out to superintendents. So hopefully you all are receiving that. And if not, please please let me know, and we'll make sure that you are getting that communication. The next question is do we have enough information about the health guidelines to even decide on whether to make the start of the school year earlier or later?
Hi, this is Kelly, and Robin and Kay, feel free to jump in. I would say no, not right at this moment, but what we want to do by thinking about early, traditional, and late is to have a plan in place so when it does come closer to the start of school and as more and more guidance comes out over the next several weeks, you will have some options to choose from.
This is Kay. I'll just share what we found out as we went through this process of trying to collect information to put in the guidance is that a couple things. One, it's important to capture your ideas regardless of whether or not you actually end up using them, but you put them down for consideration. And we found that in talking about an early, a traditional or a late opening, a regular or adjusted, in some areas there was very little difference between what you would actually do under those different scenarios. But you know, when you look at them originally, you think, well, I may have to come up with all these different plans, but actually the basis of all those plans is pretty much the same, at least from our perspective. I'm sure that you'll have some tweaks to add to that, but the important part about the framework is it gets you thinking about all the details that need to be handled.
This is Robin. I also wanted to share what I've learned from some superintendents as I've talked to them. I think it's really a good idea, and some of you out there have already thought about this, but just to share with everyone about talking not only with your community, because you know, we know that many times that we can come up with a really great idea and we think it's a really great idea. And then the actual implementation of that great idea, if we don't have parent and family support of it, it may become more difficult. Additionally, a superintendent reached out to me and said, you know, I'm going to reach out and talk to the districts that are geographically close to me. You may have teachers or staff that are in other locations in other communities that you're going to need to rely upon in order to make your plan work. So I would also encourage you to kind of reach out to your neighbors around you, other local school districts, and find out what they're thinking and how they're approaching it. That may help you make a better decision overall. And as Kay said, I think it really is just thinking through each scenario, asking the questions so that as we get closer to an implementation date, you are ready and you've already thought through some of these questions that keep arising.
I agree with all of that. Thank you all. I would also add to the superintendents, I know you're already thinking about this, and this may seem small, but you know, our calendar committees are often, and these are good conversations, but a lot of the conversations are when is fall break going to be, and does that fall on a weekend where that's the UK homecoming or the Western homecoming, and is that good or bad? And the same for spring break. And usually fall calendars you can pretty much take to the bank in a normal year because we don't have snow in the fall, knock on wood. Although the way this May is going, we very well could have snow in the fall. And, you know, aside from maybe a water line break or something that interrupts your schools, you don't have a lot of interruptions in the fall. And so your families and your communities plan trips and cabins in Gatlinburg, et cetera, over fall break, and that's pretty much solid. Spring break may be a little iffy because you may have a history in your district of having to take a few days off spring break due to snow, and so families are a little more cautious. But my point being, you need to have this conversation with your community that this fall may be a very fluid situation with school calendars, and whether or not we are in NTI during a portion of it, whether or not we'll be able to honor the fall break because we had to keep delaying school for a few days or a few weeks because of the public health issue arising from COVID-19. So I know you're already thinking about that, but that's just one more communication piece to make sure your community is informed that this fall could be very fluid.
Okay. All right, so then the question, I guess, now that several of them have is, when would the districts need to submit their plans or calendars for the 2021 school year for an early, traditional, or late opening? Or is that a question we don't have an answer to just yet?
Tony, I can take that question. This is Robin. I know that Kay talked about this a little bit, but just to clarify what she stated, right now we have your calendars. We've given a little more time in the current situation, so your calendars need to be in by July 31st. For those of you that have already submitted a calendar, if you want to change that calendar before July 31st, you're welcome to do that, but you don't have to do that. But everyone should file at least an initial calendar, one calendar, by July 31st. You will not have to amend that calendar until we get to the end of the school year, just like you always do. At the very end of the school year, we'll ask you to amend your calendar to actually reflect what really happened. Now, in order to provide this level of flexibility, I will say, and we very much want to do that so that, because we know it's going to change, and it may change again, and it may change again. So it really doesn't benefit anyone to require you all to keep submitting calendars to the state. But with that said, it will be really, really important that districts have a good, strong communication plan and are advising their local communities, their parents, their families, their students of when that calendar might change. Because we won't have the benefit of having that actual calendar and what you're actually implementing here at the state level in case someone calls and asks about that. So I would strongly encourage you to create that strong communication plan on how you're going to make that announcement and continue to advise your communities about how school is going to progress for the next school year.
So to use I guess a football analogy, we're asking you to be a football coach. We're asking you to call a play for your calendar for 2021. That play needs to be into us by July 31st. You need to take into consideration your feedback from your calendar committee, et cetera, and what under the best case scenario, or the scenario as you see it playing out. I would go ahead and consult with public health, but we know that there's no crystal ball that can tell us. But you send us your play, knowing that you have a full playbook that you keep there in your district office, that you're going to probably have to call other plays when we get to the school year. That's how it's going to work. But we don't need to see your complete playbook. We just need to know you've got one.
All right, so this is a question that's at the top of the soapbox. We've had several people like it, which means it's a pretty common question. Opening early does not seem to be a realistic option for next year. Between student and staff burnout after 40+ days of NTI and the extra cost associated, a traditional summer is needed. Other than summer ESS, can we just take this off the table?
And I can address that, and others may want to join in. This is not a requirement. This is simply was a suggestion by the governor's office, and in turn by us, that you think about this option. It's out of the ordinary. I don't know that I can remember a time, and there may be a few districts that started. I know we keep going maybe back a little earlier every year, but I don't know of a district that started in July, or at least as early as July 15 or 20. This is just a suggestion that we are okay with that, of you thinking outside the box like that. We will support you and tell your communities we support you if you make a decision to go to an early calendar from the very beginning, because there is a possibility of a spike in the fall. That's the governor just wanted to make sure that districts were thinking of that potential to go ahead and get those days in, knowing there could be a spike. There could also not be a spike. There could also be a spike in July, and if you had plans to start July 20th, you very well may have to revert to a traditional calendar or a late start. So that is completely up to you, but we want to make sure you know that we would support you on a decision like that, but we don't know what the situation will be with the coronavirus at that time as to whether that would be a good decision or not, as frustrating as that answer is.
Okay. There, just as a suggestion or a question that several have asked, is it possible to share some of the superintendent's reentry plans so that other superintendents can see those? I guess they're just wanting a way to kind of share and see what their colleagues are doing.
I am certainly supportive of that. I don't, to the extent some of the plans may be on notebook paper and Post-it notes like they would be on my desk. But that may be something that the Superintendent Association and or the co-ops would want to facilitate, those type sharing of ideas. I'm not sure if we're going to include it in the guidance document or not, but Kelly, do you want to share the thinking of one district about how to address students that don't want to come, that may not feel comfortable coming back to in-person classes, at least initially?
Sure. Just to talk about the plans, keep in mind districts won't be turning reentry plans into KDE. They'll just be turning their calendars in. But I have talked with several representatives from co-ops this week that are looking at ways to help districts think through these items. So I think that might be an area that co-ops could definitely help with as far as sharing out what other districts in their regions are doing. I won't name the district because I don't know if they want to be named or not, but one superintendent that I talked to this week talked about surveying their kids or surveying their families in the month of June to see if their families feel comfortable about sending students back to school in the fall. And keeping in mind, it wouldn't be, yes, do you want to come? No, no, I'm not. It would be more, does the student have a pre-existing health condition, or does the student live with a grandparent that's over 65 who has a health condition, or does the student have a sibling with a pre-existing condition, or a parent? So, there are things out there for safety reasons that would prevent some students from actually safely being able to return to face-to-face instruction in the fall. And so this district plans to survey their families during the month of June and have an idea about what numbers they're looking at. How many students do they plan to have back? And also doing that survey with their faculty and staff. They're thinking if possibly a third of their students weren't coming back, maybe as an example, if you typically have 4 first grade teachers, you would have 3 first grade teachers providing face-to-face instruction, and you would have your 4th first grade teacher providing virtual instruction for the students in the first grade that, for whatever reason, were unable to attend face-to-face conferences or face-to-face classes. So, I think there's a lot of creative ideas out there, and I think that goes back to what Kay was saying early. You really need to talk to your families, your community organizations, and public health when thinking about trying to develop these reentry plans.
And I would add to that this will require KDE, the example that Kelly just gave about the superintendent thinking about this plan to assist districts in being creative and how do we count that child, and how does the attendance figure look? And these are things that we've really never ever contemplated before because we've not been in a long-term emergency situation. And so I can pledge to you that we are going to be right there along with you, trying to find ways. The goal is to educate all the children in your district. And we know that may look different this school year than it's ever looked before. And so, for example, the plan that Kelly was referring to, up to 10% of that school's kids could be at home, but learning the same content as students who feel like they can't come into the building. And we want to facilitate the payments and the seek money and the attendance counts for that type of plan to work. So if ever there was a year for us to be creative and to think outside the box and to cut red tape, then this is it.
Okay, so the question is will the guidance provide recommendations, or will it just impose more questions to consider an answer?
So hopefully a little bit of both. We are going to be providing you lots of guiding questions to use as a district and school leadership team, but we've also asked public health to help provide specific examples and feedback around possibly how many students could be on a bus, or how many students on the seat of a bus, or how many desks in a classroom. So the first version may be more questions for you guys to think about in your planning, but as we continue to work with public health, we hope to have some real solid examples to share with you.
Will meal reimbursements and transportation reimbursements be cut in half if schools have students attending on alternating days? Robin, do we have an answer on that one yet? Or Kay?
This is Robin. If you'll remember the way food service and meal reimbursement works, it is based on the number of meals that you serve times a rate. So that's how it's calculated under the USDA. And at this point in time, we haven't received any additional information that the rate has gone up. So it continues to be calculated based upon number of meals times the rate.
Okay. Will opening early give the same flexibility as a variable calendar start date? I think they're looking at flexibility. So I think if they open early, will there be flexibility within the year? More flexibility perhaps than just a regular start date calendar at the beginning of a regular school year?
Well, there's several things that are going on parallel to that. There's the innovative alternative calendar that's been in effect in the past. There's the somewhat of a enticement for districts to accept a calendar late into August. And that gives you some additional flexibilities. Kay or Robin, do you have any further comments on that? I don't think for example, if your calendar started July 1st for a traditional year and it wasn't an innovative alternative calendar, then I don't think it would give you any additional flexibility, correct?
This is Kay. I think for right now, we still have to operate under the 1,062 hours and 170 instructional days. And if there's a need to revisit that legislatively or seek some kind of relief from executive order, then I think we have to address that later. But for right now, I think we just have to approach it like those are the basic requirements.
The built-in flexibility, of course, would be if you started that early, you're going to have more, assuming that we don't have spikes. If you started early and we have no spikes, then you're really ahead of the game, and you can potentially adjust your calendar later on in the year and obviously end early, have a much earlier summer and potential additional days off. So that would be a built-in flexibility that you would, assuming that we did not have spikes, which we just don't know that. We can guarantee that. We cannot guarantee that.
All right. Kelly, can you talk a little bit about NTI? There's a question about will districts be allowed to resubmit NTI applications if they're not initially approved? I think they're thinking ahead as they're looking at planning calendars.
Sure. So the application window is currently open for the 2021 school year. And if for some reason your application was not approved on the first try, the staff in David Cook's division would work with you to ensure that you can get an approved application.
Okay. All right. Looking for any other questions here on the how is the 90-day requirement for employees impacted with the early start date?
So this is Okay, and I assume you're talking about the notification of employees. Is that?
They did not. It just says, how is the 90-day requirement? I think that's along the lines they're looking at.
Yeah.
Hey, Kay, if Todd Allen is online with us, maybe he can help us with that question.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you, Robin. I think the question is related to the 90-day notice provision for the reduction in responsibility. So statute provides that school districts can provide notice to their certified staff, this applies to certified staff, of reduction in responsibilities and a corresponding reduction in pay. And that notice has to be provided by May 15th or 90 days prior to the first student attendance day, whichever is sooner. In this situation, we're not really sure at this point in time when schools are going to start. I think that school districts are perhaps anticipating if they're going to start early, then the 90 days has already expired. That's something that we may need to look at making an amendment to through executive order in consultation with the governor's office, given the very unique circumstances that we're under in this situation. So, of course, I can't provide you with legal guidance, but I would recommend that school districts stick to the May 15th deadline that is set forth specifically in statute, because that can be determined right now. We can determine right now the May 15th deadline. Since we haven't determined yet when the first day of school will be, we can't really calculate the 90-day deadline at this point in time.
Okay. There's clarification question here. Are districts to plan a calendar for 170 days and 1,062 hours for all students? And the emphasis is on all.
This is Todd. From the legal perspective, Senate Bill 177 only alleviated the 170-day requirement for the current school year. It did not make any change for the upcoming school year. So as Kay indicated earlier, for the upcoming school year, we're back to the rules as they typically were, which is 1,070 days and 1,062 instructional hours.
Todd, the only exception, this is David Cook, the only exception to that would be if they took advantage of the student variable instructional year and started school late. They are, in essence, given the same flexibility that 177 gave them to only come up with 1,062 hours if they start August 24th or later.
Okay. Question is, when do we anticipate getting guidance regarding the start date of the 2021 school year calendar and the restrictions, if any, associated with the number of children in the building? Dr. Foster?
Sure. So we plan to get the first round of guidance out to you as early as possible, probably this Friday or early next week. Our goal is this Friday, but we also want to get some feedback from public health before we send that out to you all. So hopefully this Friday, but if not, early next week. So that will be round one. And then as things change over the upcoming weeks, the guidance will also be updated to reflect any information that will receive from public health.
I would add we have a weekly meetings with public health because we know this is going to continue to change as they get additional data in that will impact guidance to you as to cleaning and sanitation protocols, whether or not numbers of kids on buses will be affected, numbers in classrooms, all of that will be dictated on the data that's and the public health guidance from the Department of Public Health. And that's why we created these weekly meetings with them to make sure that we're in lockstep with them. They are fully aware of the need, though, to plan now for those scenarios. The problem is we don't have the data. We don't know what will be the situation to exactly that would exactly dictate certain procedures be in place.
Okay, the next question is they're wanting to know about if and when they decide to start school in July, who decides if they can, and when will they know if they can or can't?
Well, the school year technically starts July 1st. So as long as your calendar committee, and you're going by the calendar committee process, and your local board makes the decision if they want to start your first day of school or classes on July 15th or July 20th, then we are not going to, it would be a calendar that would be approved. So there's nothing to say that, unless there was some technical reason that we needed to send your calendar back to you, that is the discretion of the local board.
Okay, and if we do alternate,
Kelly, Todd,
go ahead.
Robin, anything else on that?
No, agreed.
Okay, and if they do alternating days for students, how do we count that? NTI for every other day? Is there a maximum of NTI in this scenario?
So currently for the 2021 school year, we'll be going back to having 10 available days for non-traditional instruction. Of course, there may be something that changes over the summer that we would ask the governor's office to help us with those numbers of days due to the situation with COVID-19. But going into the 2021 school year, as of today, May the 12th, there will be 10 days that would be eligible for NTI days. I'll let Robin address, possibly having like some students coming on day A and different students coming on day B in regards to how you would count that in the calendar.
So that's a tricky one when we start mixing both, because right now we've been doing kind of all or nothing. So we've either been all NTI or we've been all in person. So when we move to models that contemplate, which I think we're, again, trying to be very flexible, and we think through about what that will look like, I honestly don't have the answer for you yet. We support if you have to have some in person and some NTI days and some on NTI. For the example that Kelly had given about, you might need to have 2 classrooms of in-person instruction and one that's more remote, all happening at the same time. So there's all these different models that are being explored and contemplated. I will tell you that as Commissioner Brown and I have spoken about this, and one of the questions which rightfully you're asking is, well, how does that count and how does that affect my funding? Not only, you want to make sure that you're delivering instruction, and that's really what you're there for, but you have to look at the practical side of how does that affect your funding. And I think our goal overall is to allow you to make the best decision for your students, and try not to get caught up so much in the negative implications of a funding repercussion by the decision you're making. So I think that's where we are. I don't have the answer of what that will look like now, but I can assure you that discussion is already ongoing, and us trying to think through what that looks like.
Related to that, Robin, I did get a question here, or a comment, but about whether there's been discussion about providing meals for students that are home receiving NTI instruction while the rest of the students are attending in-person classes. That's partly impacts the non-congregate feeding waiver that we have with USDA, which we hope will be renewed for the remainder of the summer. And as schools, and I don't think it will be unique to Kentucky, that we're considering models like was described here of some students at home with NTI on an alternative schedule or otherwise, and some students in the school building, we will have to continue pressing to get that non-congregate feeding waiver from USDA. Is that correct, Robin?
That is correct. And considerations about how you manage that with your cafeteria staff when you have some students that you need to take care of in your building. And then what would the model look like to service those NTI students at the same time, whether that's a continuing drive-through from parents that come to the school to pick up. Again, trying to think, it has been really challenging to come up with a sustainable model. And so this is going to add another level of complexity to that food service. But I will say, continue to have a lot of faith and confidence in our local school districts that continue to put food service at a very high priority for their students.
Another superintendent just commented about running scenarios just to see if it's going to be fiscally responsible and fiscally, if they would be fiscally able to do some of these scenarios. So I encourage you all to run those scenarios on paper as well. And then also to get caught up on some of the information I'm receiving, KASS, Jim Flynn has offered for KASS to be a repository for any reopening plans. That, again, those are your playbooks that you're not necessarily going to put in your calendar that KDE approves. It's all the other alternatives, your playbooks. KASS has agreed to be a repository for those to share with other superintendents.
Okay. How do they start school early, or how does starting school early impact certified contracts? Does anybody want to?
I can try to speak to that a little bit. I'm not sure I understand from a specific standpoint, but a certified contract is written to run with the school calendar. So it covers the fiscal year, which begins July 1st and ends on June 30th, but then covers the school calendar. So those teacher contracts have to be a minimum of 185 days, and those 185 days are spelled out in the school calendar for when certified staff appear for duty. So that's really going to be a matter for the local board in determining what their school calendar looks like.
Okay. So a couple other ones in here. I don't know if we want to move on to Robin's part and then get back to the Q&A. There are some questions on the when they're going to get their guidance on gear and some ESSER questions. Kevin, do you want me to continue with some of the Q&A?
That's a great segue into Robin's portion on accessing federal CARES Act funds. So we'll just go ahead and then we'll take the questions you mentioned. We'll take those first up after Robin finishes.
Okay. I will go ahead, Robin, if you want to, I'll go ahead and get the PowerPoint. Give me a second.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. I thought that there would be at least some interest in turning to the financial portion of our presentation today. It's nice to be online with you again. We're going to talk today about kind of updates. We've talked about the CARES Act and we've talked about ESSER and GEAR at several of our webcasts over the last several weeks, but we're going to kind of talk to you because we're getting really close to the point that we can start helping districts access funds. I'm going to talk about really overall for all funds and then talk a little bit about timelines that affect each pot. Last week, both the ESSER funds and the GEAR funds, the applications were approved by the U.S. Department of Education. So we have both of those, the responses back. They did a very quick turnaround time, just like we have mentioned before. US Ed made it very easy for us to apply, and we now have those approved. So just now working from the slide, we had talked previously about the ESSER funds being allocated through Title I, Part A. And thank you to all of you who sent in suggestions about how we might consider awarding also the GEAR funds. We have considered those possible ways to distribute, and we have landed on awarding the funds for GEAR similar to how we're going to award ESSER. So they will also be allocated under the Title I Part A formula, the same methodology. As we looked at the uses of the GEAR fund, if you'll recall, the two big eligible uses of GEAR money, the Governor's Emergency Fund is for remote learning, technology, kind of as one bucket, and then also the other bucket to help continue that all-important food service delivery. So as we thought about those two kind of buckets and thought about the best way to distribute funds, and thinking that it is likely that some of that are low-income students that may be impacted, needing a little more support on both the remote learning, technology, assistance from that pot, um, and also for our neediest students that continue to need food service, it made sense for us to distribute under that Title I formula. So we will be allocating to districts in that manner, and we'll be able to post your allocations shortly in that manner. As a reminder, for both pots of the money, before you receive funds, we're going to request that superintendents complete an assurance document in the GMAP system. We will have one assurance document for each fund. So there'll actually be two assurances out there. And it will need to come from the superintendent. Tony, if you'll go back to the prior slide, we're still on the prior slide. Thank you. So we will ask you to complete your assurance document that needs to come to us from the superintendent. And then once you submit that assurance document, the districts may request funds through the federal cash request process. We have talked about how those expenditures, if you've already had expenditures that are eligible under GEAR, and that would again be in the remote learning, technology, or food service areas, then you can go back to as far back as March 13th, which was the initial date of the National Emergency Declaration. If you have expenditures you've already incurred, you can make your first federal cash request to seek reimbursement of those amounts. I continue to caution about these are federal funds that will expire at some point, so be thoughtful in your processes. And I really wouldn't act too quickly because you're going to want to see the guidance that KDE has put together. We've had a lot of questions about guidance that might be available for consideration, even in these two kind of pots of money. So we will have that guidance available. I think that guidance will be posted and available to superintendents just for GEAR after the webcast today. So you should be watching for that. That will be coming your way. The assurance document will not be available in GMAP until Friday. So look for the GMAP assurance document for GEAR on Friday. Funding matrices, that we had a lot of questions. Can you help us to make sure that we are appropriate looking at eligible expenditures? So we have updated our funding matrix. That is on the KDE website, and you see the link on this slide where you can go out and look at those eligible expenses. That's something that federal program people and your finance officers should be very, very familiar with. I also wanted to make sure that we kind of give a shout out for districts. You may partner with external education agencies or entities to help you with your services. People are very, very busy, and staffing is short in some places. So we would encourage you. We've had a lot of external educational partners reach out to us and are very, very willing to help really with your execution of all CARES Act funding. We would, of course, advise you anytime you enter into that relationship to have someone that can monitor that relationship and report back on that as you would with any other contract or any other partnership arrangement. But we do want to remind you that you can engage those external education partners to help you in these endeavors. Finally, we are going to talk to you on the next slide about a spending plan and an annual report. So, Tony, if you could go to the next slide, please. So, under reporting requirements, we are going to ask districts to submit quarterly CDIP reports. Again, your finance officers and those at your district very familiar with that process. So we tried to make it as easy as possible and make sure it was in concert with things that you're already familiar with. Please note the new Munis project numbers that we have assigned, which are at the top of that slide. I'll also share with you that we will share this with all your finance officers if they're not on this line, so that they can be aware of these new project numbers. We will have quarterly deadlines, again, very consistent with what you're used to seeing. And then we're going to ask you to complete a spending plan template in GMAP by June 30th of 2020. I want to make very clear, again, this is, don't view this as a budget per se. Don't think of it as I have to very definitively say I'm going to spend X number of dollars in this category and X number in this category, and it will never change. We will not ask you to, again, consistently be updating or amending, because we know things can change along the way. Our spending plan request will be very easy to complete, but the objective is for us to be aware of sort of your general intentions of spending. That will help us in a number of ways. It will help us in case we get additional reporting requirements by USAID. It also will help us as we hear some kind of background discussions going on about additional funding that may be coming to either states or local school districts. We want to be able to kind of report and get a feel, at least at this point in time, your intentions of how you're going to spend that money. And that will help us advocate for additional dollars, either to continue to support those areas or in other areas. We will also request that you do an annual report template in GMAP at the end of the year. And this will be your opportunity to really tell us how you did expend your GEAR funds. So we're going to ask for that kind of high-level spending plan, your initial thoughts at the point in time in June 30th. And then we'll ask you again to complete an annual report on August 1st, 2021 to definitively tell us how you spent. And of course, we can pull information from Munis as well. If we receive additional guidance, and I will share with you that as recently as yesterday, we were receiving a little more guidance from USAID, and that's caused us to update our assurance document just a little bit. So we're going to continue to receive guidance from USAID, and there may be additional reporting requirement. But as we've said throughout the webcast today, that we're going to continue to try to make it as easy and flexible as possible. We very much support local school districts using these funds based upon their needs and what is happening at their local level. That's all I really have. It's kind of short. I will tell you that for ESSER, a lot of this is rolling out and making GEAR funds available. And you can apply for those GEAR funds on Friday. So that's when your first time that you can see that assurance and you can apply for those GEARS fund. For ESSER funds, we anticipate that our guidance will be available for ESSER funds later this week. And so we anticipate that next week you'll be able to apply for your ESSER funds. So I'm going to stop there for questions. Let me make one other plug-in. I have asked the staff in district support services to make sure that they are providing additional and more detailed information to certain groups within your central offices. So on this Thursday, May 14th, from 10 to 12, we will be having a district finance officer call, very similar to what we did a couple of weeks ago, to allow those district finance officers to dig a little deeper, have a little more detail, and answer their questions. And then similarly, we will be having a DPP call and question and answer session also on Thursday, May 14th, but we'll be doing that call from 2 to 3:30 in the afternoon. Your finance officers should already have, and I think your DPPs as well, should already have those meeting invites. If they don't have those meeting invites, please let us know and we'll make sure that they get an invitation. So I'll stop there and see if we have any questions.
Sorry, just got kicked off there for a moment. I'm back. Let me look at the refresh here. So the first question I saw on gear was what percentage of their fiscal year 19 allocation should they expect?
I knew somebody was going to ask me that, and I did not do that calculation. I have Charlie Herman on the line with me. Let's see if Charlie is better than I am. Charlie, do you have a guesstimate for us?
No, but before we get done, I will.
Okay. So
All right.
I guess for a thumbnail, until Charlie gets us this answer, think of it in this terms. So we had 194 million from ESSER, and it was 83%, or about 83% that a district would receive. The total pot for the governor's emergency is 30 million. So substantially less in that regard. So your amount will be substantially less than it would be at the 83%.
All right. So then they said they wanted to know when the Title I and Title II allocations will be released for 2020-21.
Charlie, do you have the date for Title I, Title II?
So I've not asked about Title II in the last few days, but Title I is at least a couple of weeks away still.
Okay.
check.
Okay. They wanted to know if KDE is aware. Their understanding is that if a school is not a Title I school, it does not have any access to additional funding. It would seem that GEAR funding should be directed to schools not receiving any additional help.
So if I understand the question, the way that both ESSER and GEAR will be allocated is under the Title I formula. Once the district receives those allocation amounts, they can expend those dollars on any school in their district. Now, you do have to be mindful of the equitable services requirement, and I think Dr. Foster and her office have provided some information on that. But it's not bound by the same, these dollars are not bound by the same Title I requirements. So don't think of Title I schools and not Title I schools.
Okay. The next question related to funding is, well, they wanted to know when their districts would be informed of their CARES Act funding, which I believe we've already covered. So I've got that. They also wanted to know about another one on percentage. Charlie, have you figured that one out yet? If not, the next question is, since this is federally funded, will salary have to change federal KTRS contributions and health insurance premiums?
Charlie, do you want to address? Yeah, go ahead.
So Tony, I think we've cleared this up, discussed this before, that fringe benefits will be charged to the federal grant.
Okay. All right. There is a question about the funding matrix. And again, I'm not a funding person, so I'm going to read this the best I can. What is the difference between the 613F/613FP as in Paul project numbers and 633F and 633F as P as in Paul project numbers on the funding matrix?
Good question. Thank you. Those Ps are there to track the equitable services requirements, and that is the same way we do all other federal grants. So the finance officers and the program staff should be familiar with that.
Okay. Any guidance on the CARES Act funding for our school-age child care programs? Will these have a project code similar to GEAR and ESSER, or code it to Fund 52?
I'm not sure, Robin.
Yeah, I don't know that I know the answer to that either. If that is a finance officer that's asking that question, if you can please make sure you ask that question on Thursday's call with District Support Services, and I think they'll be able to answer that for you.
Okay. Let's see here. When do folks, well, I guess this is more of a general question, but we can just go ahead and ask it. When do folks need to know if they will be reassigned returning from an MOA?
Those, to the best of my knowledge, all those letters went out last week. If it's a specific that hasn't received a letter, I guess they should either call Dr. Foster or Dr. Ellis, depending on who they report to.
Okay.
Hey, this is Kelly. Just so you know, all of my renewal and non-renewal MOA letters went out mid-April. So if for some reason you didn't receive one and you have a continuous improvement coach or an education recovery team member that is part of your district, please shoot me an email and we'll see where that letter is.
Okay.
And this is Amanda. We sent ours out as well, so please let us know, and we can definitely follow up.
Okay, Robin, I think this is going to be for Lauren. I'm not sure if Lauren is joining us today, but this is a question pertaining to information. When will they receive information with parents that they can share about the PEBT program?
So Lauren, I don't think Lauren is on the call with us today. The information, we are still working with the Cabinet for Health and Family Services about how the PEBT program will roll out. I do think we have some information out on our webpage. I'll check with Lauren on that, or you can contact Lauren Moore directly. She's the Division Director of School and Community Nutrition, and she can find additional information. Another place that you might look is, I know Lauren and her staff stay in very regular contact with your school food service directors. And so they may have additional information that they can share with you as well if you'd like to go that path.
Okay.
Hey, Tony,
Yes.
I've got your percentage.
Great, because somebody keeps asking it. I think they think that we're ignoring their question. So everybody tune in for your percentage.
Drum roll, please. So it'll be around 14% of your Title I allocation.
14% of your Title I allocation. Is that okay?
So as the other was 83% of your Title I, this will be around 14%.
Okay.
And then, of course, you get your I'll call it your regular Title I on top of that. Right, Charlie?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
All right. And they were wondering if there was a sample letter that we had or that we knew of that they can send for consultation with private and home schools on the new funds.
Yes, and you will be receiving that in those documents along with the guidance documents.
And again, you'll be getting the gear for those of you tuning in a little bit late to the webcast. You'll be getting the gear guidance today, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Because that question popped in there at the end too. So I just want to make sure everybody knows that that's going to come out. We will also be issuing a press release and media release with that information as well. So if you check your inboxes, but then also be sure to check the COVID-19 website as well.
Just wanted to reiterate on the GEARS funding, we made a decision here at the state level that all Kentucky school districts, all 172, are significantly impacted by COVID-19. The wording in that grant was that the grant funds were to be for those districts that were determined by the state departments to be significantly impacted. I'm not sure what other states are doing. Maybe other states are choosing some districts that were more impacted than others, but in Kentucky, we believe that you're all significantly impacted. So I just want to make sure we had talked about that a little bit, that terminology. So if you see that in other publications at a national level, we've made the determination that you're all significantly impacted.
So then we go to, this is kind of back to, I think most of this is going to be back to general and or the opening of school questions. So I'm just going to go kind of back, go back and revisit. Let's see here. So school nurses, this is going to probably have to do with operations. So Robin, school nurses had a meeting with the KDE nurse consultant, and it was discussed that upon return to school, students and others might be expected to wear masks. Any elaboration on that thought? Keep in mind that it is May 12th, and I believe that we're under the guidance of May 11th, correct?
Yeah, so, the governor's guidance is for anyone that's out in public to be wearing masks at this point. And we've also received, just as a state government agency, we're receiving directives from the governor about returning healthy at work, as Commissioner Brown talked about earlier. And it will require us to wear masks within our office buildings. So until we can get to a point where we can adequately social distance, and has lots of other guidance about, not meeting in conference rooms. So that is part of it. I know that Angie McDonald, our school nurse consultant, did meet with school nurses and health coordinators. And one of the questions they are asking is, will students and staff be required to wear masks? So we are trying to get, as we've said throughout this webcast, we're trying to get definitive guidance from the Department for Public Health. That is one of the questions that we've asked. We've also asked, if that is the case, where can school districts get access to this? Because we know that lots of school districts will need some assistance and guidance on where to go to receive masks, hand sanitizers, thermometers maybe. So all these are questions that we've posed to the Department of Public Health. They're trying to track that down for us. So as Kelly had indicated, as we continue to receive additional information, we will be frequently updating our guidance to answer some of these questions about mask and hand sanitizer, thermometers, all that PPE equipment.
Okay. The other question is, will the minimum daily instructional minute requirements be different to accommodate the extra time needed to ensure things like hand washing, transitions, and room cleaning?
I don't think we've addressed that as yet, but I like that question a lot, because it appreciates that there will be some additional time that will be required when you have in-person instruction happening in your building, not only for your staff, but your students. There will likely be additional need to clean more frequently, additional time for restroom breaks that might take a little longer, for more frequent hand washing. So I don't know that I have the answer to that right now, but I will put that on our list to think about, and how we may consider that, knowing that that is something that we will need to build in a little bit differently.
Okay. There was a question here about the Impact Kentucky data. Rob Akers, are you online?
Hello, I'm here.
Okay, so I just wanted to, we have shared that we did send this information out to our superintendents, that there will be a public release of the Impact Kentucky data that we have kind of delayed due to the COVID-19 crisis, but that is going to be publicly shared, and they wanted to know what exactly that meant. So I just wanted to see if you could take a minute or two to explain what's going to be happening with that process.
Sure, happy to. Just the superintendents on this call should have been given a link on Monday that would let them access their district's overall impact survey data and the individual school data. That information is also going to be accessible to principals at the end of the week. And then what you see is what the public will see, without the ability to drill into the specific questions and to disaggregate it specifically. They'll be able to look at the dashboard on June 1st. That's what will become visible to the public.
So just to reiterate, in terms of what is public, that exact site that you're seeing right now is going to be open from anybody, for anybody from the public to view the data. So just that, I hope that answers the couple of questions that we have in the soapbox as it relates to that. And if it doesn't, please specify and ask another question on that. Related to the GEAR funding, where is all the rest of the CARES Act money going? For us as a small school, it only equates to roughly $96,000 and $16,000. So they're wanting to know where the rest of the CARES Act money would go.
So let's first talk about the GEARS Act. So the GEARS Act, about $44 million coming to the Commonwealth of Kentucky. Out of the 44 million, elementary and secondary education was allotted 30 million out of the 44 million. The other 14 million is being allocated to the institutes of higher education. So that's where the rest of that money is going. As far as the ESSER funds, the 194 million that will be coming to the Commonwealth of Kentucky, at least 90% of that fund will come to local school districts. 10% of that fund may be withheld at the state level to support local school districts, grants, other efforts that we can handle on a more statewide basis. And we are currently in discussions here at the Department of Education on how best that we might utilize those funds. If it turns out that it is less than the 10%, we will make sure that that remaining balance comes to local school districts as well.
Okay. Going back to a couple of questions on NTI. Will NTI days be counted 7 hours long for those on the virtual calendar?
I'm not sure what they're referencing to a virtual calendar. David Cook, are you on? And
Yeah.
no?
I'm not sure. I'm a little confused by the wording of the question.
Okay.
So part of this, I'm probably not going to be around to make this decision when this comes up next year, but the 7-hour issue for everybody to use 7 hours this year was to help get us through this school year with a little extra help on that for some school districts to end a few days early. That's what that did for us. When we begin the next school year, we're going to start out under the same framework we normally would start out under for NTI. If we get into another situation like we did at the end of this school year, I can't speak for the next commissioner, but my guess is we're still going to be very flexible. So I don't think we are going to start out with everybody counting NTI as 7-hour days. That was a one-time thing to get us through this school year. However, to the extent we're still in a statewide emergency next year, my belief is we will still be thinking in a very flexible way if that's back on that could be very well back on the table. Is that a fair way to put it, David?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think in a regular NTI situation up until the pandemic, we would have said the rules were, and Robin can chime in here too. The rules would have been that whatever your day was before you took an NTI day, that's the day you would get for an NTI day. So if it was 6.5 hours or 6 3/4 hours, or whatever the case might be.
Okay. So the question on the impact, another question on impact, will there be a statewide press release to the media about the impact results? I can go ahead and answer that. The answer is yes. There will be a statewide press release that will be issued to the media about impact results that will also provide the link to the media and the public about the Impact Kentucky results. And that will go out on June the 1st. And then the link that came out regarding the Impact Kentucky survey was sent out yesterday as part of Commissioner Brown's Monday message to superintendents. So the Monday message is what you should search your email box for. The next question is about, do we suggest virtual learning staff and I'm guessing, let me rephrase this. Do you suggest virtual learning and in-person learning for 2021? Should we begin now letting folks know that they should be prepared to be on virtual learning versus in-person team, and does that go under other duties as assigned?
Well, it's a two-part question. One's a contract question, and as to a notification of duties, that's the second part of the question. The first part of the question, should we expect that? we described to you a scenario from a school district, and I think several are thinking of a scenario for if they estimate a certain percentage of their students would not be coming back due to fear or due to medical conditions the student may have, or that the student lives with individuals that are compromised medically. They don't want their student to be in a setting with a lot of other people. Then that district is making plans to have some virtual instruction, and then the majority of instruction taking place in the classroom, even if that classroom instruction has social distancing requirements, such as somebody seated every other seat or something. That's the adjusted schedule we talked about. So there's that possibility. There's the other possibility of staggered schedules. And we're going to know more about this as we move towards the summer, whether or not that might be a recommendation of public health. A staggered schedule would mean a certain group of students would come in, for example, on Monday, Wednesday, and then another group would come in on Tuesday, Thursday. When the students were not in class, they would be doing virtual instruction back at home. So that answers the first part of the question is yes. I think it is very likely that that would be a scenario that, if implemented in your district, would be very, very beneficial to you. The second part is notification of those potential change in duties. So Todd or Kay, do you all want to advise on that?
Sure. This is Todd. I'll jump on here. As far as certified staff, the certified staff, I believe there are two different provisions of law. One provides 30 days and the other one provides 45 or 15. I'll have to look it up and get back with you to answer that question regarding the change in the duties that the employee will be expected to perform for the upcoming school year. Of course, for certified staff, they can only be assigned duties that they're properly certified to perform. For your classified staff, that may be more expansive in what you can assign them to perform, but of course there may be certain licenses or other requirements that they're required to meet. For example, food service staff have to pass certain requirements in order to work in the cafeteria, so you would have to keep those things in mind. We'll take a look at that and get a response back on what the deadline is, because like I said, there are two different provisions of statute that provide two different time periods for changing the duties of staff.
And it's an interesting legal question, as if the duties of a teacher standing in an empty classroom teaching third graders that are 10 miles away remotely is a different duty than the 3 other third grade teachers down the hallway teaching rooms full of 20 kids.
My interpretation is that would not be a different, there would be no difference in duties there.
That'd be mine as well. And that example I just gave, that is a scenario that this superintendent is contemplating, that if you have 4 fourth grade classrooms and a quarter of your third graders are going to be out for those reasons I mentioned earlier, fear or the other medical issues, then you have 3 of your third grade teachers teaching there, and then you have the other third grade teacher standing in front of an empty classroom every day, and then that is being sent over to those kids, the same exact instruction over to those kids that are sitting at home.
That's right. The district is required to notify the certified employees of a change in their duties, but they're also required to provide job descriptions. And the two scenarios that you described there, Commissioner Brown, whether they're teaching remotely or students sitting in the classroom, I think would both fall under the same job description.
The discipline might be easier in the one virtually. Maybe not, I don't know.
Okay. There's a clarification request or comment on the gear and the ESSER funds. They're saying that, they're wondering what the total for Title I funds for all of Kentucky schools is.
It's around 230 million.
Okay. I think they were asking if it's close, so their numbers were off. They were just wanting to know if the formula was equitable to each school district and how they can receive funding.
I won't say it's equitable. I'll say it's proportional based on the Title I formula.
Okay. The next question, how how are we supposed to help with the concern about emergency child COVID-19 and fears that parents may have about sending children to school? Any guidance related to that?
I'll start off and then others chime in. The first thing is make sure you stay in contact with your local health department. They are going to be the ones that are getting updates weekly, if not daily, from the state health department, getting updates from CDC and others, of course, on how that part of the virus is. We're learning more about that every day. And, you know, the governor talked about a young child that is I think on a ventilator, was on the subject of the press conference yesterday. So first of all, stay in very close contact with your local health department to make sure you're abreast of those issues that may in turn be affecting your community and the fear of your parents or students to come to school. And then the second would be developing some type of plan to reach out and educate those students. And that's the plan we were mentioning that the superintendent shared with us earlier this week, trying to estimate, for example, if this superintendent's going to send a survey out in August to parents and guardians as to whether or not they intend to send their student to school. If the doors were to open on, let's say, August 15th, are you going to send your child to school if we have in-person classes? Or do you have concerns, lingering concerns regarding COVID-19 that would cause you not to send your student to school? And then that district is going to come up with a number based on those survey results on how to deliver alternative instruction to those kids that are going to stay at home. And obviously that's probably not, we're not talking really about home hospital. We're talking about something less than that, but a kind of a new way of reaching out to students. And that's where we're going to need to be very flexible and nimble to assist districts that are willing to do that type of outreach to make sure we give you the tools you need to make that happen. So first, make sure you're staying in contact with your local health department. And make sure your communities are informed about what the latest on that type of that part of the disease is. And then second, try to have a plan.
Okay. Anybody else want to add to that? Okay. Do changes in a job description needed to combat COVID-19 have to be board approved?
My board attorney hat's hanging in Louisville. I'll defer to Todd on that.
The local board is the one who approves all of the positions within the school district. They do not hire the actual individuals, but they're the ones responsible for approving all positions within the district. So, of course, they should consult their board counsel, but I would recommend that if they're making changes to positions, that the board approve that.
Okay. If alternate day schedules are one of the recommended approaches for next year, how will a teacher be available to teach half of the students in person and those that are learning remotely simultaneously?
Kelly or Amanda, can you?
Yeah, I don't think the example we gave had the same teacher teaching remotely and face-to-face kids. And if I said that, I misspoke. The one example the district mentioned was having one teacher that would solely do the virtual instruction. So, I mean, I think that's an option. I think what you're describing, if you were going to have someone that could teach some students face-to-face and at the same time teach students virtually, then that becomes a technology question that you would have to make sure that the student at home had internet access, the device, the school was set up for that. I think that's where David Couch might want to chime in. But you know, the scenarios that we're putting out there are scenarios that other districts have shared with us and scenarios that we're putting in the guidance for things for you to think about. But the one in particular district I spoke to talked about having a teacher designated just for the virtual instruction only.
Okay. Many districts are struggling with the hiring processes, particularly the fingerprint requirement for background checks for new hires. this must be done in person. Are there any thoughts or advice for us in this process?
I just had this conversation today with, and I can't even remember who it was with, so I know we talked about it. Robin, I think that might have been you. No.
It could have been.
It's about how we all remember.
That is
Yeah.
that actually is a really good, a definite
It is a
issue,
really good question, though.
and something that if we could get
I'll flag that one for you.
flag it, and if we can get public health to weigh in on that over the next week, and then we'll answer that on the Tuesday webcast.
Okay.
Because public health will need to give us to the that obviously does have to be done in person for the fingerprint. So the public health will need to be giving us some guidance on how districts can accomplish that.
We'll put
Okay.
that on our list for public health. I also want to let you know that we also have on our list for public health, in case I didn't say it earlier, is required vaccinations, immunizations that students need to start school or to be up to date. That is also on our list of questions that we've posed to public health and asked for guidance and direction on.
There was another question. I think this was a concern. I think we can partially answer this. Is starting early in the summer is a problem with districts that have major renovation projects that are ongoing. And what I had heard collectively from the team is that, you know, by no means is starting early a requirement. This is just an option for districts to consider. Is that correct?
That's correct. The governor wanted to make sure, and we in turn also want to make sure you were aware, just to be thinking in that way, that he wanted to kind of give a little bit of a forecast, and we all know forecasts can change. We certainly know here in Kentucky that weather forecasts change, but he wanted everyone to know, and the lieutenant governor wanted the districts to know that it is possible that there could be a spike in the fall, and if you all had that information that that's a possibility, want you to know it's okay for you to plan kind of outside the box to start early. But we also know there are other complicating factors. You know, I know there are some situations where, you know, your contractors are finishing up the punch list on a Friday, and you've got kids coming in on a Monday. So we know that just on a traditional year. So we know that there are other problems that could prevent that.
Okay. I know we're getting close to the 4 o'clock hour, so I just wanted to, there's a couple more questions I try to get in here. With the information, the new information about projected budget for shortfalls, should districts expect reduced funding? We chose not to non-renew all of our coaches, but I'm reconsidering based on our projected numbers. Guidance, please. Thank you.
Well, I will start off, Robin. This is not a good way to end the webcast, but you know, we're asking you to do all these things and cleaning protocols, and almost all of this is going to cost extra money. And then we're also saying, oh, by the way, you know, we are hearing that we will have revenue problems at the state, and there is a possibility of budget reductions. And again, here we are telling you this, but we don't have all the full answers yet, and we don't know what that looks like. You know, I'm here at the farm, working from the farm, and I came across my senior high school yearbook, and I was the editor then, and our title of the yearbook was "Expect the Unexpected" for our senior year. And I thought to myself how appropriate that is. I came across that this week, and that's what next year is going to be. It's expect the unexpected. And that's what we're asking you to do, as hard as that is to do. And particularly we're facing an uncertain budget forecast. Robin, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think that was very well said. I would say it is likely that revenues will not be what we predicted them to be, either through the consensus forecasting group by the here at the Commonwealth, and as we continue to receive communications from our office's state budget director, you know, they're trying to manage our expectations, and I would say that it is likely that funding will be reduced come the next fiscal year.
Another question, they wanted to know a little bit about the FEMA funding. Can you briefly discuss the FEMA funding, some ideas of what we could apply for and how this process is going to work?
Yeah, so let me address that. We're going to have more information for your district finance officers at the Thursday call. I think at the last webcast, I had provided a web link or that you could go to find out more about FEMA funding. The very best people to talk to about FEMA funding are the people at emergency management, the state emergency management. And we will repost the information with the help link that you can ask your questions there, along with the link to all the documents that have been posted by FEMA. But you'll need to go out there and take a look at those. We will also send out, we'll make sure that we send that information out in the superintendent's Monday message as well.
Okay. All right. I think we'll wrap up the questions today. There's a couple more on here that we'll put into the Q&A that we constantly update with a question about when will districts find out about their CEP status? The original notification was slated for April 15th.
I'll hop in. This is Rob. Those are being reviewed at present and being replied to in real time as they're coming in. If you have any further questions, Todd Davis is running point on that. And if you would let us know, we can certainly provide any support that you need.
Okay. And Commissioner Brown, if you want to, or go ahead, Kelly.
I just want to say one more thing about the gear guidance that'll be coming out to superintendents and finance officers after this webinar, and it will also be posted to the COVID-19 page. At the end of that guidance document, there are contact people for each program area, because I know there are several different people in your district that'll be using that document. The table of contents is at the beginning to walk you through each program area, and then there are contact people listed at the very last page of the document.
Again, that email will be coming from Commissioner Brown. You will also receive an email from the communications office in your email box that will be going out to the media, that will have links to the documents. And as Kelly mentioned, it'll also be on the COVID-19 page. So that'll be 3 ways that you will be able to access those documents here within, I would say within the next hour, if not sooner. And Commissioner Brown, back to you.
All right, we're a little over time. It's been a great discussion. Just plan on every Tuesday at 2 o'clock. We're going to be meeting together. We've learned from Governor Beshear's press conferences, repetition is the key to learning. I know we can all repeat several things that he says, and that's because we've heard it over and over again. And so we're going to keep doing these webcasts, and we will have a recurring agenda item on through the summer of the reopening process as that guidance evolves. Be looking for that document. Several positive things, though, to end on. Just note that we have that national recognition coming up on Saturday to recognize the class of 2020. We will be getting a meeting or a calendar invitation, just so it's marked on your calendar and you can remind your communities. Tony will be sharing some additional information through a press release on that you can also share with your local communities. And of course, we're planning the statewide virtual celebration of the class of 2020. And thank you all for sending all those pictures in. And federal funds are on the way. So we know you have more expenses than those will satisfy, but that will be a big help to us. And I guess we'll end it with my high school yearbook phrase, expect the unexpected, but I can't think of a better group to do it with than the Kentucky school community and Kentucky school family. Thank you all for what you're doing. Hang in there. Always contact us by whatever means is most convenient for you if we can help you. Have a great rest of the day.